Alright, so we made it to The Matrix. This has nothing to do with the movie. I've only seen the first one, and from what I remember, it's humans being plugged into this virtual reality and used for their energy by robots. Although this doesn't seem like much a movie anymore, they're used for their bioelectrical energy, which is actually a thing. You do produce bioelectrical energy, like I've talked about a lot. Also, I just want to say thank you to everybody that actually watches these videos. I know they're long, but they're worth it, and it's all part of the plan. If you put shit in your coffee, you don't actually like coffee. Alright, so The Matrix is something more complex than a movie could produce. So within your body right now exists a matrix that connects every cell and tissue to each other. And not only to each other, but to the outside world, the universe, and whatever is beyond that. So this is deeper than grounding. Even though that's my focus, the grounding, I also had other plans to help you realize that you create and produce physical energy that's taken in and sent off into other organisms and into the universe. As crazy as that sounds, I believe it 100%. And you're not going to hurt my feelings if you call me crazy, because a lot of people do when I tell them this stuff. I believe it 100% because behind everything that you see and everything that you feel, there are invisible energies and forces that are intertwined with anything and everything. Electricity, magnetism, gravity, electromagnetism. These are webs that connect all of our scientific domains. Physics, biology, astronomy, cosmology. This is our matrix, and it's real. It's not a movie. And it all starts here, within. And something as fleeting as a thought, positive or negative, can alter this matrix. You alter the matrix, you can change the universe. Wow. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about one of my favorite topics, one that's been hidden among my videos. So, your matrix. In grounding, you connect to the Earth's electromagnetic properties. It's electrons and Schumann resonances. These electrons enter your body. Well, how do they do that? And then what? How do they travel? Into what purpose? These are questions your typical Chad would ask himself. So the basic understanding of electron movement in the body is semiconduction, charge transfer. Before we get into semiconduction, let's relearn our current understanding of the body and what it's made up of. Cells, biology's most basic unit. So if you think back to high school biology or even college biology, your textbook would typically provide you with a very bland representation of the cell. If I were to ask you to draw me a picture of a cell right now, you would probably draw me a picture of this bag of fluid with some organelles floating around in it. The nucleus, the mitochondria. This is a flawed and outdated representation of the cell that's still being used today. And that means that a lot of scientists are beginning their education with this bad illustration in their head. And this is wrong. The most disturbing part of this illustration is that when you see it, it's its own separate entity, the cell, from the surrounding extracellular materials. It's disconnected in a way. So the typical view of the cell will be this bag of cytoplasm or cell water that separates the organelles or the machinery of the cell. This cytoplasm is thought to be the medium for which chemical reactions take place. You also have the cytoskeleton, which is made up of micro and intermediate filaments, microtubules, holds everything in place within the cell. It also acts as the highway of the cell. And we'll come back to this in a bit. So let's look outside the cell. Let's move up a level and consider tissues, what cells make up. So tissues aren't entirely made up of cells. They're actually made up of most of the space in between cells. So that's what you would call the extracellular matrix. And that's made up of proteins and sugars like chondroitin, keratin sulfate, heparin, collagen, elastin, fibronectin, laminin. These molecules, they come together to form these negatively charged proteoglycans, so these protein sugars that hydrate connective tissue. And this protects connective tissue from mechanical forces like compression and tension. And it's limited to that, to just the mechanical and the structural roles, but it's much more than that. So cell physiology is thought of in a very compartmentalized type of way. The cell is just this basic unit that involves chemical reactions and mechanical forces, and electricity is limited to the movement of charged ions back and forth across the cell. Let's go back to the cytoskeleton, cell skeleton, which is much more than this. The cytoskeleton connects to something called the matrix, which is an extremely complex system. The matrix refers to all of the connective tissue in your body that connects all of the cells to each other. The fascia, the tendons, the ligaments, the cartilage, the bones. This is the only system in the body that has a direct connection to every cell in your body. No other system does this. Every strand of DNA, every cell, every tissue, every organ is connected to this network. So you've heard of the fabric of the universe and how it bends around planets, matter. This is the fabric of your body that bends around and connects all the planets in your body, the DNA, the cells, the tissues. So it's kind of like a universe within a universe. So all of these connective tissues form what are called the extracellular matrices, which connect everything inside the cell to everything outside the cell via these proteins called integrins. Integrins penetrate the cell to connect the cytoskeleton to the extracellular matrix. And since the cytoskeleton is connected to all the organelles within the cell, as well as the nuclear matrix, this means that everything inward or outward, from the DNA to the connective tissues, the extracellular matrix is connected. The nuclear matrix is connected to the matrix of the cytoskeleton, which is connected to the extracellular matrix, the connective tissues, which extends outward to the skin. So everything is connected to this living matrix. So hopefully it's changed your perception on just how connected every cell is to one another. So let's replay that. Your body's matrix is the molecular fabric of your body. This is fascia, connective tissues, extracellular matrices, cytoskeletons, integrins, nuclear matrices. So in Western medicine, the matrix isn't given the credit it deserves. It's seen mainly as a structural role, but it's vital for cell communication and energy transfer. So let's take a step back and look at the electrocardiogram, or the EKG. So the question was, in the early 1900s, how are electric fields from the beating heart getting transferred to the surface of the skin, where they can be measured? So what was thought, and is still thought to this day, is that the body is this one big volume conductor, or dielectric, that consists of about 60% water, about 30% of that being inside the cell, and around 30% of that being outside the cell, separated by a plasma membrane. And mobile ions carry current through the tissues. So when we think of charge transfer in the body, our typical visualization is ions diffusing through tissues. So let's take a different perspective here, because ionic and molecular charge transfer are relatively too big and slow moving to move at speeds that normal living processes require. And not only that, but the typical thought process doesn't explain the immense speed that grounding affects the body physiologically. So there has to be an explanation for that speed. And a lot of this began with the Hungarian scientist Albert Szent-Györgyi, who believed that biochemistry occurred far too slowly to explain the subtlety of life. And so he proposed, and this is denied by many scientists still to this day, that proteins are semiconductors that allow for rapid charge transfer from one place in the body to another. These proteins are what allow frequencies and electrons to travel through your body at such great speeds. So bioelectricity, it's what those robots wanted in the movie, right? So electricity is confined to the movement of ions in the body: sodium, potassium, calcium, chloride. This is thought to be the main form of electricity in your body, these ions. It's electrons. So to help you understand, let's look at modern technology. So like your phone or your laptop, they don't use ions, they use semiconduction. They rely on the flow of electrons across a crystalline lattice. So a semiconductor has characteristics of a conductor and an insulator, so hence the semi. Like silicone, if you increase the temperature of a semiconductor, its electrical resistance decreases. You can manipulate a semiconductor to do what you want it to do by doping it or introducing impurities into its crystalline structure. This is the basis for creating diodes and transistors and pretty much all modern tech. You can use semiconductors to store energy, alter signals, filter information. The movement of electrons across semiconductors are what allow for energy and information to be transferred really fucking fast. If you have a bunch of atoms arranged in a crystalline lattice structure, electrons can move more freely. So remember that Hungarian scientist that we talked about earlier? We're going to go back to him really quick. So his proposal that proteins are semiconductors was met with a lot of hate. Scientists of his era, and even today, are just like, who's this asshole? You can't conduct electricity through proteins, and we have studies that show that. Dehydrated proteins can't conduct electricity, which are what they used in their studies, but hydrated proteins can conduct electricity. Semiconductors were once thought, and we still thought to this day, to only occur in inorganic structures, but are in fact possible in biologic structures, like proteins. And what's your body's matrix composed of? Proteins. Now we're getting somewhere. So the biologic structures that make up your matrix have the same semiconducting properties that are so revered in the electronics industry, and they're being considered, maybe already being used, to develop future technology. So the most abundant protein in your body, collagen, is what makes up a lot of your connective tissue. And if you remember those protein sugars that we talked about earlier, that hydrate connective tissue, that's what hydrates collagen, along with a special type of water that we'll talk about a different time. But collagen by weight is about 70% water, and this makes it conductive. And if you put it under pressure, it can produce charge. If you change the temperature around it, it can produce charge in the matrix. So think of your connective tissues as your electrical circuit. These semiconducting biomolecules can send, receive, and store energy and information. Electrons can traverse this fabric of the body, this protein crystalline matrix, at really fast speeds. And that's what I, along with a few other people, believe explains the incredible speed that grounding has in the body. And it operates much faster than the nervous system. So think of your body's matrix, your body's circuit, as a built-in ground regulation system. Grounding is so important that your body has a system embedded into it to allow for conducted electrons to travel through it, not just electrons, but other forms of energy, sound, vibrations. So your ground regulation system, your matrix, provides a pathway for electrons to all of your cells, tissues, and organs, and contributes to your inflammatory and oxidative stress preparedness. It's protective and acts as a charge reservoir for electrons. And it can become depleted over time, like through insulation. And when it's depleted, your body can't function normally without compensating, and it can't heal itself efficiently. So how do you solve a depleted matrix? So you ground. You connect to the Earth's electrical system, where electrons can flow into you. So think of it as charging yourself up, in a sense. Constantly replenishing your ground regulation system is vital for your health. Alright, so that's all I've got for the matrix. And the living matrix is complex, and I probably haven't done it full justice by talking about it today. So maybe I'll go into other aspects of it another time. But when I started this video, I talked about how the matrix connects everything within, and not only does it do that, it connects everything to the outside world, the universe. So let's use some of our knowledge about this topic and apply it. So you've heard of epigenetics, how we can control the expression of genes. So I think with knowledge of the matrix, we can add an important insight to that. So this protein matrix is the interface that connects the fabric of your body to the fabric of space. The nuclear matrix, the DNA matrix, is connected to all the other protein matrices that we talked about earlier, which are connected to everything. So when you have a thought or a feeling, or you think of yourself in a certain way, you're creating changes at the level of your DNA, electrical changes. And when you alter the matrix of your DNA, you alter the matrix of your body and mind. And when you alter the matrix of your body and mind, you alter the universe. So you are the universe, and the universe is you.